All right, it's now 7 o'clock. This is Morning Express. It's time for The Way It Is, where we look at what possibly has been happening over the country in the last few days and specifically the weekend, and just put it into perspective. And this morning, in case you're joining us now, I have Ambrose Weda, Michael Agwanda, and Honorable Irungu Kangata as the panelists. And gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning. Now, let's start with The Way It Is. And we'll start with the ODM retreat, which is bound to take place in the coast this week. And the main question, and I'll start with you, Mr. Agwanda, is where we have, or rather the position of the opposition right now. There are those who felt that the opposition is synonymous with Raila Odinga. So at the point the handshake came in, it seemed that like there was a weakened opposition right there. And of course, there's also the question of whether NASA is ODM and ODM is NASA. But let's start with the first of all, finding out what's the position of the opposition, in your opinion, given what happened after the handshake. And it seems like quite a number of ODM leaders who are very strong and vocal against Jubilee have now crossed, the floor.
I think the position of the opposition in this country stands that they need to look at what the government is doing, criticize where it is necessary, and support where it is necessary. Mike, the problem we've had in this country is that we looked at the opposition as the enemy of the government, which is not the truth in many, many countries. In many countries, the opposition checks on the government, and there are cases where they can agree and even vote together, and we've seen that in the past. However, the leadership of the opposition in this country has been really, really autocratic in my view. They've not been able to allow the members of the opposition, elected leaders, to speak their mind. And for that reason, every opposition elected leader in this country has been speaking the mind of the leader, not necessarily what they think. And that is why they've been serious underperformance, both in the Senate as well as in Parliament. I strongly believe that this handshake, of course, has confused so many people that have been elected in the opposition zones, and more so in the Luo land, in the Luo community. But now we are seeing even people from the coastal area saying, perhaps we need to think on our own, not necessarily to wait for our leader to speak on our behalf. And they seem to be getting into bed with the government. And of course, not only the government, but they're actually getting into bed with the deputy president. Now, I want to underscore something here that I really don't think is the best language you want to use. The deputy president, just like Honorable Kangata had said, has the right to go any place in this country and to talk to anybody and to start projects, even if he's starting 100 a day. The problem is, are we going to see the implementation of these projects until the end, or is it just a political gimmicks? I strongly believe, as it is today, the amount of time that leaders are taking to go to churches, maybe 2 or 3 on a Sunday, is what we saw in the campaign time, and perhaps we should not be taken through that route. But I also want to say that specifically for the deputy president, for words like utangatanga and kurandaranda and uyu, for a deputy president, a person of the deputy president caliber, I think we need to restrain on how we address our deputy president, in my view.
But maybe that pace was set by his leader, the president himself.
Correct. But that does not mean that is right. That does not mean that that's how we need to address him. I think we need to respect him. We need to address him with the respect that he deserves as the deputy president of this country. Because when we address our deputy president with those kind of terminology, what about our neighbors? How do they view the deputy president when he goes out there to represent us and to represent a nation? And not just the president or the opposition leader, but every citizen of this country. Will the other leaders now say, you've come to Randa and Kutangatanga here? Now look at these words. They are not really very good for our own image. As much as we may have our own way that we address others, we need to know that international community is right here and they're watching every word we say on every leader. And once there is a breakdown in respect between our leaders, amongst our leaders, what about the other followers? They will disrespect those leaders.
All right.
But I finish by saying this. Until we know And I know that the liaison committee, the building bridge committee has 1 year. Until we know what this handshake is all about, all we can benefit from it is the peace and the decorum that we are seeing in this country.
Okay, Senator, let me come to you. Any strong government would be very happy to have a strong opposition because it is there basically just to keep checks and balances. And the fact that the government would be willing and has the passion to deliver would not be a problem having a strong opposition. Are you confident that Kenya right now has a strong opposition that is able to keep government in check?
I think it's an issue of you cannot have your cake and eat it. What we are having currently is what we call an informal consociational government. A consociational government is a government which we call is a government that's usually formed in countries which are usually ethnically divided. A good example is like a place like Lebanon, a place like Northern Ireland. In those ethnically divided societies, you usually find as experts propose, every contesting ethnic group to come together in one grand coalition entity, and they rule somehow together. So this one is informal. The one we had between 2008 and 2013 was a formal constitutional government. They have negatives, but they do also have positive. The positive aspects are usually what we call a peace dividend. They usually enable society to become peaceful and to proceed. But one of the major demerits is the issue arising about what about the opposition. It becomes quite tricky, for instance, to fill up a position like chairman of the Parliamentary Accounts Committee, chairman of Parliamentary Investment Committee. Those are legally constituted oversight committees which are supposed to oversight the government, and traditionally they are left for the opposition. So therefore, an issue arises: who fills this position? What about the former position of, let's say, leader of the opposition, or even a former opposition? So, but on the other hand, in such countries, including Kenya, they enjoy what we call a peace dividend. People can now do their businesses together. So it's an issue of which between the two do you rank high? Is it the opposition per se, or is it the peace that's usually brought out by the so-called bringing together the so-called elites of that society?
All right.
So from where I see it, between the two, I think peace is quite important. And probably what we are having, I have heard some people proposing we entrench that into law. Probably we need to think along that line. But again, I agree. What about opposition? It appears currently the opposition is the media. You are the one who are assisting us to unravel all corruption, whereas ideally that is usually done by opposition politicians.
All right. What are your thoughts on where we are?
Let the Kenyans get this very clearly. Kenya is a presidential system. You elect the executive, and the role of checks and balances, what would be like opposition, is supposed to be done by our elected leaders like Honorable Kenyatta here. But fear and many other considerations have made them see we are Jubilee, we are ODM. So if we are Jubilee, whatever Jubilee administration does, however wrong it is, let's keep quiet. Then the ODM and the NASA also see, because we are not in, whatever good they do, we will not recognize. That warped thinking is caused by our parliamentarians. If you look at the Kenyan system, it's more of the American system, the presidential system. The British one, the Westminster one, that's where you have official opposition that's supposed to oppose and to do things and to scrutinize. So for now, Honorable Raila has been a volunteer opposition. But constitutionally, our opposition people, leaders who are supposed to watch things for us as President Uhuru and his cabinet and the rest are working, are Honorable Kenyatta here and Aden Duale and all these people. But they have gone to bed with government. Therefore, they say, since Raila is also with us, let us eat and be quiet. Please wake up and do that part for us.
And I want, Irungu Kenyatta, do you want to respond to that?
Well, you may use, well, I don't know, you may describe members of parliament in that way, but we may have to look at the political culture that is underpinning this country. Yes, you may say ours is a presidential system. Parliamentarians are the ones who are supposed to oversight the executive collectively. But on the other hand, you have to appreciate some facts. Even in America, you will find Donald Trump, the people who support him tend to be the Republican. The people who tend to oppose him and put him to task are the Democrats. So I think you may say we don't have an opposition per se in the fashion of the United Kingdom, but the reality is there's an opposition. If you're not in power in America, you oppose Donald Trump. So even here in Kenya, I think that was the same notion for the last several years.
Okay.
You are not part of Jubilee, you tended to oppose Jubilee.
All right, I want us now to look at something else that has come up, and this is, well, Kenya has been bedeviled by corruption for a long time, but it seems to some quarters that the president is cracking the whip. And I'll start with you, Honorable Kenyatta, because one of the suggestions that the president has given, and we're waiting to see how this is going to be followed through, especially with the legal side of it, is lifestyle audits. And let's start with, first of all, finding out from you, are you willing to go through a lifestyle audit? Because it seems that that might be a starting point for us to finally find out, you know, where some of this coffers money is going. Are you willing to go through a lifestyle audit? And secondly, do you see that as a possible beginning point to fight corruption?
First question, yes, I am. Anytime they should come to my office or any other place.
Have you done your wealth declaration, which is supposed to have been done even as you get into office?
Yes, indeed. In fact, we do it to the best of my knowledge every year. You need
every 2 years.
Yes, every 2 years. So I've always been doing that.
Okay.
So my records
So you're on record
updated
as having done that?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Do you think then that is the way to go in terms of now fighting corruption? Because this money disappears. It is known that it disappears with the hands of people in power, but somehow it's amorphous. We never know who it is.
Yes, indeed. So long as it's not selective, so long as it is subjective, why not? I think it's a very good idea. At times you see some people earning about 50,000, but they have huge flats. They have a lot of assets which you can't explain. They don't have loans, and you are public servants. You don't even have a business. So to me, it makes a lot of sense. I think that is the way to go. In other democracies, they usually use that as a tool to fight against corruption. So to me, it is a very important step. We need to congratulate His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta. And those of us who are in government, we are ready for it. Okay. We are raring to go. Anytime we are told to come and subject ourselves to...
You're happy to do that. Okay, I shall check the records and ensure that we have your wealth declaration filled in. Ambrose, yes. The legal follow-up to this, because it's a very good political statement, sounds good to the ears, but legally, is there something that can be followed through?
I think the parliamentarians made some kind of a cover-up called wealth declaration. Just they give you a form. I've seen it. And I've been asked to fill it. And occasionally, once or twice, I've filled it. And actually, it is a ground. It's a form you fill it. If you fill it brilliantly, then you take into account the kind of wealth you want to accumulate within that period. Then you fill it in that form. Then along the way, you cover it up. You will find that legally, the framework is not sufficient. But politically and morally, what the president is doing is good. What we do not know is, you know, corruption is like adultery. You can see those who have committed adultery, but you may not have real evidence, but you can see it. If I have eaten, you can clearly see, even if I sit put. We are looking at who will go and, first of all, scrutinize him, do audit on him. We want to see those guys, and we will pray for them to have courage. Then from there, you go to number 2, Honorable William Ruto. Do the audit. Maybe you get his enemies, the audit of Ruto, you call Honorable Raila Odinga and a team and say, audit this one. Then we know it will be. So there are some big cuts that auditing would be very difficult. But if we were to pull through that level of audit, The rest are mincemeat. People like Hon Kenyatta and Weda here, mincemeat. You will go under the table and you will be audited very quickly. And when the audit is truly done, you will see. You will be able to ask him, Mr. Weda, these 3 Range Rovers, they cost how much? You will find where they were bought. This big ranch, you find, and then you say, within your practice, let's see the legal practice and so on, you can clearly see stolen money.
But now, in a case where, for instance, somebody has put their assets in, say, family members' names, those are not their assets. How do we trace that? Because some of these people are not dumb to put everything in their own names.
It is not their own names. You see, what is stolen is also, we are so suspicious that even putting it in our wives' name, we put in their names, but some of them we don't even tell them. That is why there's the growth of unaccounted for buildings. You go to Dandora, Mwiki, you see all these places. They are not title deeds, but you see huge buildings worth millions of shillings. Who is this that would invest 200 million and it doesn't have a title? He only has a certificate from some ranching. This is because they know this is how you hide this wealth. Once we put legislation where as you account for your wealth, the wealth that remains unaccounted for will be forfeited. That is one. 2, there is no way if you come to me and you trace when I got married 25 years ago and you see my wife and my children, surely if my wife turns out to be having a flat in Kilimani, you'll definitely ask her, dear lady, now also show us.
How did you acquire this?
How did you acquire this? He'll definitely tell you, ask my husband. If you ask my son who has hardly gone to work, he owns this, and as you say. So if we were to tighten the noose by dealing with the top, the big top, the rest are chicken feed. We'll deal, and then we will close the fields for corruption, and then we'll have enough assets to sell, to fund the deficit in the budget. And we'll carry on.
All right, Mr. Agwanda, wealth declaration as a way of fighting corruption. And I guess it's important to note that this is just a beginning point. It may not be the actual fight, but at least it's a starting point.
I'm happy with Honorable Kenyatta here. We know that he's one of the most basic people in Parliament or in the Senate in terms of the way he lives, and we appreciate that. And I know he will, in a million years, say, bring it, I sign it. But most of those MPs and members of Senates that are there will not say, bring it, and I'll sign it. Because just like Honorable Weda has said here, wealth declaration, which they're supposed to do, every public officer in senior position is supposed to do within every 3 years, within every 2 years, are done. But nobody picks up that piece of paper and say, okay, Honorable Kenyatta, you've declared 10 houses. We want to find out whether you have 20 more houses at your back. Nobody does that. And so it's a PR gimmick, in my view, to sign that paper and place it there. We saw ministers being interviewed just a few months ago, and some declared 100 million, 50 million, some declared 20 million. Well, as Mr. Weda has said, if you're smart enough, you will know that this is an office of influence, and I might just generate 200 million out of it. I'll put 200 million as my asset. Nobody's going to check whether I own this 200 million. So there is a gap there that you cannot say that by the wealth declaration, you've actually given a watertight information about your wealth. Secondly, on the issue of the president saying life audit will start, and it will start with me, and then Wuyu, and then governors, and everybody else. Let me tell you, that's a huge statement that every thief in this country will be shivering to the bottom of their bed trying to hide what they've achieved. But I wish the president would have gone further than that, not just saying that we will make sure that people, lifestyle audit is done, but then they will say no transfers of asset in the next 1 month or 2 months as we do the audit. If not, all these people are now busy transferring their asset to whomsoever they may want. In fact, to foundation, that's the easiest way to put the money. Foundation, non-profit organization, and many others. And perhaps that is taking place today. Now, when I saw one of the members of parliament saying, look, I think I like the idea. It's from Rift Valley. He said, I like the idea of lifestyle audit. But now let's go to my father and then my grandfather and then see what happens. It is practically impossible to go to Uhuru's father and start investigating what he acquired and what he did not acquire. He's a second generation or third generation politician from his father, who are the founders of this country. That cannot happen. What we are talking about is not even the politicians. Some of them are very wealthy and have stolen money. That's the truth of the matter. But you cannot steal money in this country unless you're working with a public servant. And that public servant is an AIU holder who is authorizing all this money. It is, you don't have to go to the moon and do the lifestyle audit. You just walk into these people's office and find all these contracts that have been done. In fact, we are looking too far, in my view, by saying lifestyle audit, while we know if today you just declare that you want to know the peers of Interior and Interior, what he owns in this country, it would just be a matter of second. NIS does a very good job, and DCI does a very good job. And in my view, I really think that we are probably stretching this too far. We just need to ram onto these people. And that's what I said. Get the big people. The small ones are mincemeat. These ones, they'll just come and say, this is what I have.
All right, Honorable Kenyatta, there is also a notion that, or rather, let me start by saying that in the Senate and even in in Parliament, your responsibility is oversight. And oversight for several things, including coffers, including money that belongs to the public. Now, some of these members of parliament, some of these senators, some of these leaders are people who you interact with. Is there a possibility that there are those who possibly you may know, or your fellows or colleagues may know, and are quiet about it? Because then how are you oversighting for us?
Well, first and foremost, there is every likelihood. There are some people who may have issues with this process, just like in any other institution. I would imagine if they were to call on us here, I can see some suspicious faces. So you never know, it happens. You may find some people who may get jittery. So therefore, I foresee that may happen in the National Assembly and also in the Senate. But be that as it may, I think we do not fear as members of parliament to subject ourselves to an audit. I know vast majority of parliamentarians are people who are honest. This notion of blanket condemnation of members of parliament is quite unfair. You'll be surprised, vast majority of members of parliament and senators, they're people who came out from the private sector with very strong credentials. Some were MDs of top-notch companies, some were top-notch professionals. So therefore, I would urge we don't condemn them in a blanket manner. Otherwise, you'll be soiling some people's reputation, which you have taken so many years to build. So therefore, I know there are several members of parliament who are quite good. Number two, there is nothing wrong with this idea. Even what that member of parliament, I think it is Oscar Sudi you are referring to, said, he was just broaching an idea. He floated it out there. So again, but I think if I were to be asked, number one, I think audit is a process that can even trace hiding of assets. Because one, every asset has a date of acquisition. It has a date when you are going to transfer it. And therefore, if, for instance, people start doing that, we'll be able to go to the lands registry. We see this property was transferred to who? When was that done? And therefore, in a sense, then you start asking yourself, what was the consideration? Did you pay any money to transfer that property to so and so? Can you show us the bank account? So meaning, all these assets are legal. They're traceable. They are traceable. They are created by legal instruments. So everyone can know whether you are indeed hiding. Others may decide to hide those assets abroad. Last week, I was in Austria, Vienna. We were representing Kenya in an international forum. There's an agency of the UN that is called United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime. They have a convention, which Kenya is a party to, that is called a Convention Against Corruption. And one of the provisions in that convention is about assets recovery and tracing properties that have been trashed abroad. So therefore, one of the things that we told that convention, we wanted assistance for any money that may have been hidden abroad. And countries are quite now eager to assist Kenya to trace any property that may have been stashed abroad by the corrupt. So I foresee we are going in a world where corrupt people will not have anywhere to hide.
So in short, what you're saying is that if we really want to fight this corruption, even by following through those assets, it is possible. If
Yes,
yes,
it is
possible. There's a legal framework that can follow that up.
Unless you're talking of assets which do not have a registry. No wonder we were discussing the so-called digital assets.
The digital assets.
Because they don't have a registry. But if you're talking of a company, we have a company registry here at Sharia House, right? If you're talking about land, we have the lands ministry.
If it is cars,
if it is about car,
logbooks.
we have NTSA, it's a registry. If it's about shares, we have the so-called Nairobi Stock Exchange. I think they have a registry there. Okay. If it's about whatever assets you may have in this country, it has a registry, which incidentally, that registry is in the hands of the government. Yeah, and so meaning all these things, wherever you may hide your assets, the government has some control. If it's about a bank, CBK has an oversight role over banks, right?
Okay.
So everywhere you hide your money.
All right, Mr. Agwanda.
I think that's where I come from. It's in the hand of the government that is being accused of corruption. And that's the problem. When you're talking about files at the Ministry of Land, that's where the files disappear. When there is a critical file that is needed, that's when the title deed is not there. And you cannot even trace how many lands are in, current that you cannot even find who the real owners are because land officials have colluded with the cartels and have stolen the documents. The question, the fundamental question that perhaps we're going to ask as a country is who is this that is going to do this lifestyle audit if the government themselves and the people who are senior in the government are the ones already accused of corruption? And I'm not saying all of them, but majority of the government and public servants have stolen money, and they've stolen money with the citizens. And so when you say that the government is going to do this, I'm wondering who is going to help do this lifestyle audit, because some of those people are the real thieves. They will be helping these people. We've had the likes of EACC now being sidelined by the DPP's office and DCI's office. Why are they being sidelined? Because it looks like they're not able to handle the task that has been given them, simply because you go out there and there are many corrupt governors, there are many corrupt CECs in the counties, there are many corrupt parliamentarians, but they wouldn't go to them because when an officer goes there to investigate, he gets 100 million and he goes home and he says, man, I don't think there is any corruption there, because he will never work for 100 million in 70 years. We've just seen what has happened in NYS 2, where basically a chief investigator is involved in the whole fiasco of business with NYS. And so you're wondering, but which angel is coming to do this lifestyle audit? I think that's why parliamentarians, and you ask Honorable Kenyatta a very simple question that I needed answer. How do you oversight on behalf of the people? In my view, that is what perhaps we need to hear from Honorable Kenyatta more than anything else. How do they ensure that as parliamentarians, they are also raining on these people instead of just calling them when there is a whistleblower somewhere? I know they might say that we do not have an arm on investigative, an investigation arm of Parliament, but really they are members of this country. They are members.
They see what's happening.
They see what is happening. They know, but until something is mentioned, you don't hear them talk.
Can I reply to that? You say the jurisdiction of Parliament through two ways. Number one, either a matter of public interest that has been highlighted in the media, for instance, but number two, and most importantly, through the reports of the Auditor General, particularly for Public Accounts Committee and Public Investments Committee. So they're the one, of course, who will come through, they check your books. If they see an anomaly, they will come before the parliamentary committee, and then you'll be called upon to come and defend. Of course, surely, you cannot just summon a person who has no query, where you don't have any evidence of malfeasance. So therefore, you have to rely on a certain report. But there are instances, for instance, this NYS, where you may find the Auditor General was unable to uncover a problem. In such an instance, you therefore rely on two things, either a public outcry, like the instance case, or where you may get a whistleblower who may as well petition Parliament. You see, we have procedures of petitioning Parliament. You may petition, you may even ask a question. You may draw a question directly to a member of Parliament or through parliamentary procedures. Then Parliament then will get the jurisdiction. It will ask that question. And once that happens, then Parliament will proceed to ask questions. Okay. And I can tell you, we investigate so many things. You go to Parliament, you will find day in, day out, there are so many matters that are being brought by Parliament which do not come in public limelight. Because, of course, press is the one that decides we are going to highlight this story. This one we think is of no use. That one we have no control over. But there are so many things that we investigate.
That you're oversighting. Yes. All right, and let me come to you, Weda. One of the other problems that we're facing because of corruption, and sometimes this term corruption, maybe we need to redefine it, but it's one of contraband goods. We've seen in the recent past there's a lot of things coming in, including sugar, which supposedly might even be poisonous. Now, we've gotten to a point where I think we're so greedy as a country, to a point where we're putting people's lives at risk. How do we deal with this? Because it's not because we don't have laws, it's not because we don't have institutions, but we just seem to be so greedy to a point where we're willing to exchange life for money.
Thank you. I think now Kenyans should understand this. There's always, let me talk about sugar. There's always things like, oh, sugar in Australia is cheaper, sugar in where is cheaper, but when you come here, you tell them, there's no way you can say ugali cooked in Nyeri is cheaper than ugali cooked in Kisumu if you follow the same process. Why do I say so? What is brought from outside is sugar which has not finished the process of refinery. There are several stages, and each stage is very expensive. And the nearer it is to being fit for human consumption, the more expensive the process is. So what do? You leave it incomplete, then you bring it to Kenya, then you say it is cheaper. So what we import are poisons. And then the gap, the difference, is what we make as profit. For it to come here, it's not that we don't know. It's not that people don't know. Those who allow it actually know their cut. They know, they say, bring this raw sugar, I'll pay you this, I'll pay you this. And then they are brought into some of these mushrooming factories, they are packed in there, then they crush kidogo, then they blend with the local sugar and they sell to us, and we continue getting cancer and cheering them as we go to our death. The kind of greed that we experience is by us Kenyans. Otherwise, we have enough facilities to ensure, enough laws to ensure that these things do not come in. What we need is a change of heart. The heart of man, God himself regretted creating me and Kangata here. He was grieved because our heart is inclined to wickedness. We need to change our heart so that what you do, you say, would I do it for myself? Would I do it for my child? These contraband goods are goods that are rejected in other places. You find that even the labels we have, if you take even our milk or our what, the labels we have, they are not the content. They're just put there to attract money. So until I think we get angry as a nation, as people, and we'll get angry when so many of us have died of cancer and related diseases, that we will say an end to this. Most of the imports we have are bad.
All right, Mr. Gwanda, it looks like our question here may not even be... Sorry, you wanted to weigh in on that?
Yes, personally, I would propose a radical measure that we stop much reliance on government to deliver things. Take, for instance, the problem of the sugar. I think the problem lies in the idea of centralizing standardization with the government. If you want to import anything or even to produce anything in this country, you must take it before to KBS, that is Kenya Bureau of Standards. To me, that's not a good idea. We need to change that. We create what we call an agency model. That is, we create a profession that is comprised of people who have done science-based courses. Let's say like a Bachelor of Science in industrial production or something. There are several such courses. So that you have a certain body of certain professions. So instead of people going to KBS to get quality marks, these are the people who will be doing it. So you find, let's say, in Kisumu, you have scientists there with their private practice. You go there, you obtain your standardization mark, and then you proceed to do your business. If there is a problem, we are going to punish that scientist who gave you that standardization mark and you, the proprietor or the owner of that good. That way, you do two things. One, you decentralize standardization. Two, you create employment. And again, now the work of KBS will be just to enforce standards and probably to discipline.
But Irungu Kangata,
I say that
whereas that sounds like a good plan, the issue is not that the legislation that we have currently cannot deal with that kind of malpractice. We already have laws in place.
No, we don't. You see, the problem is how we have configured our state. Everything has now been bestowed on the state. Yeah, the problem to me is there's a legal issue. Because now, it's like, for instance, assume, for instance, was to say, we are going to abolish the legal profession. Everyone with a legal problem should be coming here to Sharia House. What would that portend for this country? This is the whole idea. So the idea, we need to roll back the state. We need to roll back the state. That's my idea. If you roll back the state, for instance, let me give you a good example. You're talking of 25 billion that has been lost with NYS. I don't know, certain billion that have been lost with NYS. But why did that issue become an issue? After we started channeling a lot of money to NYS. Assume, for instance, you do not send that money to NYS. You either give that money to private sector. You give them certain goals. We need to roll back this.
Let me hear from Mr. Gonda. Mr. Gonda.
There is nothing we are discussing here other than corruption. And I think Mr. Weda is putting it very clearly that I wish Kenyans will cry for their countrymen, their mothers and their sisters.
When you import, Kenyans are we talking about here? Because they're the same Kenyans being poisoned.
You see, the irony of it all is when you import this sugar into this country, you're not going to tell your mama and your aunt in the village that you should not buy this sugar. You know it is contaminated for that reason. As much as Honorable Kenyatta might be running away from the responsibility that is duly assigned to the government and that is kept today, and saying we could have a better way to do it, that's for a later date. We are looking at now. And what is happening now is KEBS has been given the mandate to make sure that everything that gets into this country has standards that are approved by the government. Whether they're being followed or not, that's a question for another day. That is why some of these things are supposed to be tested at the port of entry, and that is Mombasa Port. How do they find themselves in Kakamega? How do they find themselves in Kitui? How do they find themselves? You mean that there was no cop on the road? Why these things are being transported at night? And for your information, trailers are not supposed to be driven at night. Does it mean that somebody never tested this thing at the port of entry? Does it mean that KEBS did not look at this thing? And if it didn't, then how did they leave the port without a certificate from KEBS? Nothing can come from outside this country and pass through the port without KEBS certification. And so what I'm saying is, when we have agencies that are supposed to look into the values and the properties that comes into this country and check them whether they're worth our standard, and they sleep with the cartels that are bringing the sugar. Sugar is not something that we are realizing today. This is what fund most campaigns. This is what makes some of these people so rich, because it will be bought. You only need to bring it here. I wish the government will come very hard on the importers of sugar, on the importers of cooking oil, on the importers of maize, and say, if it does not pass our test from the port of entry, it cannot find itself here. How do you want to do the damage control when people are already buying the sugars in their shops?
And unfortunately, I think, well, we'll have to wind up because of time. I'll just give you 1 second to have your closing comments.
Yes.
Weda.
The raw sugar that we import is what is ailing our sugar industry. If you look at the raw sugar, it's not supposed to be imported. But you saw it came in raw sugar. And then you go to some go down and arrest people. You should have gone to the go down, then to the transporters, then to the people who authorized it. By now, we would have been another 100 people in court. Then people will be serious.
Absolutely. And now we'll have to wind up because of time. And unfortunately, it's not that we don't have institutions, it's not that we don't have laws, but the individuals that we have as gatekeepers probably are compromised. So as Kenya, maybe we need to have that conversation on our morality and our values, because we've reached a point where greed has become so much to a point where we're exchanging life for money. That's the way it is. It is now 20 minutes to 8. We're going to take a short break, but do stay with us. We have more coming up right here, including the highlights of the World Cup.
This is KTN News.